guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Taylor. Today's date is September 12th, which means if you're a constant reader or if you enjoy Stephen King's works, The Institute came out on the 10th, 2 days ago. I picked it up the day that it came out, but I didn't have a chance to read it yet because I have some plans for this book. Today is my day off. I have nothing planned, so today I am going to start this book and not go to bed until I finish it. So I think I can manage it. This is not one of King's bigger books, so it's definitely doable. It's not like I'm trying to marathon it or, you know, The Stand or something. So it's 557 pages long. All I know about The Institute is that it is Firestarter meets It. Those are two of my favorite Stephen King books. So I have high expectations for this one. I have high hopes that I'm going to love it as well. I think King writes children characters really, really well. I've been waiting for this one for a long time. And Stephen King's last couple of books, I know there's been a lot of controversy around whether or not they're actually good or not. Stephen King's last release was Elevation, which was a very beautiful book, but kind of disappointing. I mean, I didn't hate it like I know some other people did. Definitely think that it should have been in a book of short stories, but it is kind of like a cool collector's piece. Like the cover is stunning, and even like the inside of the book too is really cool. So yeah, this was mediocre. So I'm really hoping that this one is a good read for me. This is the bookmark I am going to be using. Just a quick little plug, I'll leave this shop down below. It's A Stranger Dream, I believe. They have the coolest bookmarks for horror fans, and this is obviously Stephen King's famous good boy turned bad boy Cujo. I'll check back in with you guys periodically throughout the book. I haven't decided if it's going to be a spoiler vlog or spoiler free yet. I'm leaning towards making it spoiler free and then talking about spoilers at the end of this, so you can watch like the first half if you haven't read it yet, and then the second half you can just click out of because that'll be the spoiler part. But yeah, I'm gonna start this. I'm super excited. I will check back in with you guys when I've actually started reading it. So I made it to page 40. The first 40 pages, like the first segment of the book, we're following a man named Tim. And I'm not really sure where he's fitting in the narrative because The Institute says on the dust jacket it's about a boy named Luke Ellis who gets abducted and taken to a place where kids like him, kids with special abilities, are kind of operated on, experimented on, something like that. So I haven't seen anything of that yet. I've just seen this guy named Tim and just kind of following him a little bit. It doesn't really seem, it's in a different state than it says Luke, the protagonist, is supposed to be. So we'll see. We'll see. There's no accidents with King. So I'm sure this guy is going to play a role sometime. I'm sure we won't see him until like the end or something like that. So that's intriguing. I just got to page 40 and it's the next segment of the book is called The Smart Kid. So I'm sure that's going to start getting into Luke and the kids with abilities and all of that. So I'm very excited. Yeah, it's good so far. It's not great, but again, I think it's just because I'm really dying to see actually what the jacket was about. And what like it was promoted as. So I think once it gets into that main story, I'll be liking it a little bit more. So I'm gonna keep reading. So I'm on page 163 of The Institute, and I was correct in my last update after that first little introductory, I guess, section. We did get to meet Luke and had a little brief period of time where everything was okay for him, and then he gets kidnapped and taken to the Institute. I don't think any of that is spoilers because it's all in the dust jacket. Side note, I don't know if this is a regional thing, but growing up, everyone around me called it a dusk jacket, and I know it's a dust jacket now, but old habits die hard because that's obviously what I learned it as. So yeah, I know I say dusk jacket a lot instead of dust jacket, and I try and correct myself when I hear it, but I don't. It's annoying in editing, I know. But yeah, that is all on the dust jacket, so it's not really a spoiler. I am really enjoying the characters. So Luke is the main character. That's him on the cover. He is a very gifted individual, but not just for the telekinesis powers that he has. He is, I would say, probably a little bit along the lines of Spencer Reid on Criminal Minds. He's 12 years old, but he was already kind of fielding offers to colleges before he gets kidnapped and taken to this place. And so far, you learn that there are two different types of kids that are in the Institute, kids with telekinesis and telepathy. And some of them are more skilled at it than others. None of them are really on the superhero level of either of these. A lot of them, they can't control it, so you know, they're wondering why they're even here because it's not like they'd be a threat. And the other ones, when they can control it, it's very minimal things like moving a chess piece, or, you know, moving a bug out of the way, or figuring out what your grandma's middle name was, something like that. Something very, very small. The characters are good so far. The adults that work on the Institute are next level creepy. I want to punch every single one of them. And the kids are pretty much good in terms of characterization. I think some of them could have been like written a little bit older, and this is me. I grew up pretty much in a sheltered area, so this could just be my experiences, but there's two characters in particular that are like 12 or 13, and they kind of seem like 15 or 16. Again, that's not really the hugest difference, and that might just be because where I was and, you know, my peers and around me and everything like that, we didn't grow up as fast as that, so that could totally be like a normal 12, 13-year-old behavior. They just seem a little bit older than what they're supposed to be, but for the most part, it's really good. We're still getting, I don't know if you can see my bookmark in there, but we're still getting used to the institution, kind of trying to figure out what it is. There's lots of tests going on. These kids are being tested, and we're not really sure what's happening. So I'm gonna get back to reading that, and I will check back in with you guys later. Hey guys, it has been a minute since I last updated. I planned on reading The Institute in a single day, and that just didn't happen. After my last update, I got a call from my coworker, and it turned out her roommate actually went to the ER, and she had to go with her because they're both grad students, and the roommate's parents don't live in state, and so yeah, I had to cover her shift, so that blew my plans for a day off. It's no big deal. Stuff happens. I'm obviously happy to help. And then just a bunch of shit hit the fan in terms of my own personal life. This is definitely not the vlog for that because I'm trying to keep this update very short and get back into Stephen King stuff, but I have a day off again. It is now Monday. I think I started this vlog on Thursday, but I haven't picked up the Institute since then because I did want to capture all of my reactions on vlog for you guys. So I'm gonna go grab the book and then let you know where I am in the Institute. It's definitely not farther than I think I was on the last time because again, I haven't read since then, but I'm on page 167 and I'm really enjoying it. I am going to pick it up, but that's all for this update. Like, I have a change of clothes, just kind of explaining all of that. It's a different day. It's a different day. We're gonna finish the Institute. I will check back in with you guys a little bit later. Okay, so I'm on like page 280. I just got to like one of the dividers in the book. It's divided up into sections. I do have to say the comparisons to Firestarter are very accurate, especially with the Institute itself and that sort of building and things that go on inside it pertaining to people with powers. That's very much like Firestarter, and I'm actually enjoying those parts better than the ones in Firestarter because there's definitely more. I don't know if it's because it's like children protagonists as opposed to an adult protagonist, but it's definitely got like a more hopeful outlook, which is nice. It's not like depressing, bleary. I mean, obviously it's a horrifying situation, but there's more hope throughout the chapters. The kids want to survive and escape. Not all hope is lost. Now, however, it's also been compared to It, and I really don't see any comparison to that whatsoever. It is based on a loose group of kids, which I guess is what people are comparing It to. However, I do think a large part of that comparison to It is kind of piggybacking off probably the It movie that came out, like right before this book came out. Because other than that, I don't really see any comparison at all. This is definitely, well, I don't want to say not supernatural because we're dealing with like telekinesis and superpowers, but it's definitely not supernatural on the scheme of Pennywise is. And also there's not like a solid group of kids. Luke is thrown into this place, he doesn't know any of these people, and there's a high amount of turnaround in the Institute. That's not a spoiler, it's in the jacket of the book. So while there are people that he meets, there's kind of the people that are staying, at least in a part of the Institute that he is staying in, there's a lot of turnover. So there's not that solid, steady group of kids. So you don't really get that magic, that beautiful magic of a wonderful friendship from It because the basis isn't there. This book is going very fast through time, and there's not like a lot of time to really build those character relationships. Now, with the part that I'm on, I definitely see how the initial first part of the book that I didn't really know how it was going to fit into the story. I see how those two different storylines are going to come together, I'm pretty sure. So that's going to be interesting. I'm very intrigued to find out what happens in the rest of the book. I mean, that sounds stupid, but like this is a page turner. I want to find out what happens. There are some very awful things going on in this Institute, and even though you don't really see a lot of the characters for a lot of time, I don't know if it's because they're children or because they're just well-written, likable characters, but like I want to find out what happens to them and I want to make sure they're okay. That's all I have for this update, and I will check back in. I think there should only be about like 2 more updates before I finish and get on to talking about more of like a comprehensive review and spoilers of the book. So yeah, I'm definitely more than halfway through the book, I believe. So looking forward to continuing on with it. I just finished the Institute. Trying not to cry. I didn't actually cry. I did get a little teary during several parts of the ending. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to sit on it for a little bit, kind of gather my thoughts and figure out what I'm gonna rate it on Goodreads, and just gather my thoughts, figure out what I'm gonna say for the review at the end of this video. But yeah, I loved it. It's gonna be a good rating, and I'm excited to talk with you guys about it in a few seconds. So if you haven't read The Institute and you don't want to be spoiled for it at all, I would stop watching probably now. I will talk about The Institute a little bit more in my monthly wrap-up, and that'll be no spoilers, so you can find out my star rating there. But after this clip, it's going to be the spoilery discussion section, so if you haven't read it, I would just go ahead and end the video now, and I will see you in the next clip. Alright, I am here to talk about The Institute by Stephen King. I finished this up. This vlog was definitely not what I wanted it to be. I wanted to read it all in one go, but, you know, I had a little bit more time to sit and think about it and read on it, so I guess, you know, that kind of is gonna go in my favor, because it was a little bit easier for me to kind of consolidate the points that I wanted to make and really just think about what I really liked about this book and what I really didn't like about this book. So first things first, getting into the stats of this one, I ended up giving this book a 5 out of 5 stars. And that is just for me personally. I'm definitely a person who reviews books based more on like pleasure and how much I enjoyed the book rather than literary merit. If I was just going off of, if I was like a professional reviewer, you know, something like that where I'd be getting paid to do more of non-biased, just strictly based on literary merit of the book, it would probably be a 4 out of 5 stars. But for me, a book gets a 5-star when it can elicit a physical reaction out of me, whether, you know, that be horror or, you know, crying whether good or bad things happen. Something like that, if it really like hits me in the gut and elicits a physical response in some way, that automatically elevates it for me, because it's something that's gonna stick around with me, and this book definitely has that potential to stick around with me for a while. This did hit very close to home in a number of ways. I'm actually gonna be setting it there because it's easier than just holding it up throughout the entirety of this little clip here. I do have my notes that I'll be referencing down. So again, before getting into this book, there are trigger warnings. There's child abuse in here. There are some graphic depictions of abuse, so keep an eye out for that if that is a trigger for you. And there's also some strong language / slurs. There's the N-word in terms of racial slurs, and then there is the R-word for mental disability. These are not glorified phrases. I know the N-word comes up one time. The R-word is probably maybe twice, but again, not mentioned much, and it is mentioned in a way that, you know, it's not glorifying the language. The people using the language are, you know, they're bad words, and it's kind of highlighting that, and it's not celebrating the words or people who use those words or encouraging the use of them in any way. But those are emotionally charged words for a reason, so I wanted to include them in the trigger warnings. They are there. They're not in it a substantial amount, but they are there. So overall, I really enjoyed this one. I did tear up during this one a couple of times, I think about 3. It definitely got an emotional reaction out of me. This one is definitely more of like sci-fi thriller, not so much horror. It's not it's not horror in the way that there are like monsters or, you know, stereotypical horror elements. It's definitely more thrilling. The stuff that happens to the kids in the Institute is horrifying, but it's not scary. I would say it's definitely a different type of horror. It's hard to read, but it doesn't scare you, if that makes sense. It's just awful things happening, unfortunately, but I would definitely classify it more as like that sci-fi thriller than a horror novel. I do think Stephen King fans are really going to appreciate this one overall, just because it does have, you know, King's newer books have a definite different feel than his older books, but I think this is a pretty good blend of both. You know, it's that newer writing style, but it definitely has a lot of callbacks to a lot of good older King novels that I think a lot of people will really appreciate, myself included. I really did enjoy the overall feel of this story. Really did feel like a classic King book to me, even though it was one of his newer releases. Now, in terms of plot, I would say the first half, maybe even like 3/4 of the book is very, very character driven. You really get to get inside the minds of these kids, you know, Luke and Avery. You really get to know and fall in love and really start to root for these characters. You're in the institute, these people are doing tests on these children. You don't really know exactly what for. There are definitely a lot more questions than there are answers, but you're really just getting into the headspace of these kids, learning about them, really getting into that really sort of deep character work that King is really good at. And then the second half really switches tone, and it's much more plot driven. So the first half's very, very slow. The second half is very fast. So that was a little odd in terms of pacing. I wouldn't say it's unusual for King. I have noticed a lot of his books kind of tend to fall into that, but it is definitely there. I almost want to say this could be a duology just because some of the things that are explored in here are very big picture things. I think in terms of any like sort of conspiracy based book, it's very hard to dismantle something that has been going on for generations. The Institute is not the only institute in the world, and again, you know, I'm getting into spoiler sections, so don't come at me, I already gave you a warning. We're getting into spoiler parts of the book here. The Institute in the United States is not the only institute. These institutes are all over the world, testing on children, and what you find out is using them to take out world threats to preserve the safety of many at expense of some. So the things that they're doing for these children, the governments kind of convince themselves that it is for the better good, so it doesn't matter what happens to these children as long as, you know, thousands of children may be sacrificed, but millions of people are going to be saved, so is that the better number? It's very hard when you're dealing with such a big existential threat like that, because these programs started in the 1940s, and this book is set in present day. It's very hard, I think, to kind of tackle that sort of big structure and get it all neatly resolved in one book. This book definitely could have been longer. I think the ending was a little bit rushed because it's a big threat. It's not just one ghost, one monster, one vampire, you know, under the stairs, under your closet, in your bed, something like that. It's a big threat, and it's a lot for one person to tackle, which I feel like maybe could have been expanded upon. I do think this is good as a standalone. You know, it's 500 pages. I am a glutton for punishment and King's longer works, like The Stand and It. I tend to like his bigger books better. So I honestly think this could have been expanded upon more and made into like a huge whopping tome just to explore the huge grand scale picture of what these kids are trying to take down in the end. I really enjoyed the kids, especially Avery. He was my favorite character, and I think this was part of the reason why I teared up a lot at this book and it hit so close to home for me, because he does kind of remind me a lot of my little brother, who is pretty much at that age. I would say he's kind of like a blend of my brother and my sister, who is a little bit older, and again, this is why this book kind of did hit so hard and have that emotional reaction for me, because I'm very close to my siblings. I'm the oldest of 5. My youngest 2 siblings, my brother and my sister, are 12 and 10 respectively. So reading some of these characters, I can really visualize my siblings in that situation, which just really, really hit me hard. That definitely played into my emotional reaction on how things happened. And of course, big spoiler coming up, when Avery dies, I just, man, that was... He's my favorite character in this book, and I understand why he had to die. I think it was a very incredibly sweet moment, and man, getting emotional just thinking about it. Like, his last thought is, it was really good having friends. I love that, and I think this book has a lot of callbacks to Firestarter, was one of the books it was compared to. This book is it has more optimistic tone for me than Firestarter, and maybe that's because it's kids in captivity. Kids are so adaptable and they just really bounce back. Like, the stuff that they endure is literal abuse. It's horrible. You know, they get basically waterboarded, they get injections, they basically get probed by thermometers. It's awful, but for the most part, they still try and have connections with the other kids at this institute. They try and look out for each other, you know, they become friends and they bond together, and I think that's really wonderful, and I think that touches on something that I really love about King's writing, is the everyman sort of perspective of it. His protagonists, for the most part, aren't really special. They're your average person with maybe a little bit of special abilities or like special circumstances, and kind of showing that really anyone can make a positive change, anyone can make a positive difference. This book was a little bit political, and I know, you know, you either love that or you hate it. I personally don't mind. I know, and a lot of people, this is so valid, don't like reading books about anything having to do with real world politics, because they believe that, you know, reading for enjoyment should be separate it from books set in our world, and you know, it's a hellscape right now in a lot of ways, and I can totally understand why someone wouldn't want their hobby for enjoyment being kind of taken over by some real world shittiness that's going on. However, I do think for me, why I didn't mind it, like the tone is so optimistic in this one. I feel, as someone who kind of feels like, well, what the hell can I do? You know, I'm just one person, like I can't do anything. But all of these kids, I mean, Luke is like Spencer Reid level smart, but for the rest of them, these are average Joes. Tim is some night knocker in this rundown town down south. Things aren't really working out for him. He's not like the smartest guy in the room. He's not, you know, the most connected or put together. Like, he's just an average Joe. And same with these kids, they're just kids. And just them actually rising up, realizing how much power they had, especially this scene when all of the kids in the back half realize how much power that they have as individuals when they band together. It's corny as hell on one level, sure, but it's so reassuring to kind of read that optimism that King has, where an individual can enact change. Like I was talking about earlier, it's big picture stuff. Like, this institute is not the only one. It's happening globally, and just kids coming together to stop that on their own is incredible. The two King books that I would kind of liken this the most to, like if you liked these then you might like this, I would say the Dead Zone and Firestarter are very apt. I had heard in kind of some early like promos for it that it was also being compared to It. Other than a group of kids being like the main characters for the most part, this didn't really have anything else to do with it. It really didn't feel like an It style of book. I definitely think if you do like Firestarter, or if you do like the Dead Zone, then you will really like this one. I loved both of those. I loved this one as well, so I think that you probably would as well. Now, I think this book kind of represents a sort of change in King. And I think it's one that a lot of constant readers and people who've been reading King for a while have kind of seen slowly starting to happen over time. King's newer books are written differently than his old books. And I think that's to be expected. You know, the man is in his 70s. He's been writing books since, I don't know, when did Carrie come out, like the 70s? There's growth to be expected there. You know, in his earlier career, he did suffer with drug addiction, alcoholism, things that do weigh on your psyche and weigh on your mind. He was a younger man, different times. And, you know, I think it's good as a human to grow and to change and to become, you know, a different human. You don't want to be stagnant. You want to grow. And I think writing is such a personal and mental hobby and skill set that when you change as a person, I think your writing changes too. So I think this book kind of shows that the new writing style that King has isn't really a fluke. It's definitely going to be there from now on, for good or for bad. Even though this did really remind me in places of Firestarter and of the Dead Zone, it is written differently than his older work. I really don't mind, because I know I can always go back to the giant lexicon of King books and pick one of those up if I'm craving the old style King. But I do think that the new writing style is here to stay. I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think it is what it is. People change over time. I mean, it is what it is. I think if you have kind of noticed that you don't like the writing style of what he's been coming out with recently, this is more of the same. It does still feel like a King book. You can tell King wrote it. It still has all the things that I love from King, like the characterizations and, you know, really immersing you into the world and making you believe in an unbelievable story. But it is something to be noted that it is definitely new King work, and I would say probably if it hasn't been for you, you probably won't like this one, because it is definitely written in that newer writing style. Anyway, I have been rambling about this book for a while, and takeaway, I loved it. Definitely I think was way better than Elevation, and it definitely I think fits better with his whole collection of work than The Outsider did. So I think if you're on the fence, you should definitely at least try and pick it up. I have heard that the audiobook is fantastic, so I'm kind of tempted to hop on the wait list and listen to it in a couple months time, which is when I'm sure it'll become available to me. So I think if you're a King fan, definitely pick it up. I don't recommend you pick this up if it's your very first foray into King. I think definitely starting with a classic is better for this author, but it was a really good installment. It's probably up there, ooh, I don't know, it's hard ranking King books, it really is, but it was a really good, solid read for me. Again, 5 out of 5 stars if I was rating it less on my emotions and more on the actual structure of the book and out of like a literary merit sense, probably a 4 out of 5 stars still though. It was just a really, really good read, and that is going to be the end of this video. Let me know if you liked this kind of style of content. I kind of want to do more of these reading vlogs just for one new release as opposed to a vlog where I'm like talking about a lot of different books at once. I thought it was really fun. I definitely want to do it for each new Stephen King release and maybe go back and do some of the backlog King books that I haven't read yet. There aren't many of them, but there are a good amount. If you got to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below. Let me know if you've read The Institute yet or not. If you liked it, what your thoughts were on it. I'd love to engage with you down below on that. Subscribe for more bookish and creepy content from me, and I will catch you guys in my next video. Bye!